Hello everybody, welcome to Big Bird Outdoors. I'm Nate for those who haven't been here before, and today's video I'm starting something a little different. I'm going to do a little series. I don't know exactly how many episodes it'll be, probably 3 or 4 if I would take a guess. Just a little short mini series. And I, as a fishing guide, my favorite thing to fish for is crappie. If you've been here before, you've probably seen videos of me fishing for them and even talking about them a little bit in something like this. But for this series, I'm going to basically make a little mini series about just crappie fishing, just all year, the gear, the locations, all kinds of different stuff about just crappie fishing. So it's going to be a little masterclass about what I look for as a guide throughout the year, even if I'm not doing guides throughout the year, where I'm looking when I'm personally fishing or as a guide throughout the year to catch crappie. So we'll get right to it. I'll do some little graphic stuff to show what I'm talking about, and we'll just kind of, for this video, we're going to do just location, so where you're going to look to find crappie. So we're going to kind of go through the cycle of the year, each of the different seasons, what you're going to be looking for as they're going through spawn, post-spawn, into the summer, into the fall as they're starting to fatten up for the winter, and then through the winter and that deep cold, what you're going to be looking for. Alright, so first I'm kind of just going to go through the general movements. So where you're going to be actually wanting to look for the fish, and then I will move on to when you're actually in those depths locations, kind of what you want to purposely or directly look for on the actual bottom. So to start, I just got a little binder and little marker as a whiteboard deal. So the big blue is kind of just your general lake, the green is kind of like a depth chart sort of deal. And then these little red lines represent any kind of shore cover, so any types of limbs, docks, anything like that. So as we start, I'll start in the spring because that's when most guys think of, okay, this is when I'm crappie fishing. So your pre-spawn, who's yelling? Oh, okay. So your pre-spawn, you're going to kind of want to be in these little in-between areas. So on that mid, say this depth line is 6 to 8 feet. That's kind of where you want to be because those kind of stand as staging areas. They're a little offshore, but they're not way far out there in the deep cliffs and ledges that you're going to be fishing later on. So then areas like these flats where it's pushed off way away from the shoreline is also a very good spot. Oftentimes there's weeds or edges and ledges and deep sandbars that you can fish and find fish in. During this time of the year, they're just eating and eating. After they're coming out of the winter, they're starting to energize back up before the spawn. So you kind of want to just, if you can find 1 or 2 fish, you've probably found at least a decent sized school during this time period. And also these bigger outlying areas, like big long docks, big trees, underground stumps that are in that 6 to about 12 feet of water. Those are also very good areas for pre-spawn. So then as we move into the spawn and the post-spawn, then you're really going to want to key in on both these inner areas of the shore. So on little trees, big docks, stuff like that, because the fish are starting to move into spawn. You're going to want to look for sandbars and little sandy areas that they might be spawning in. Depending on the lake, if it's a rocky lake, then you're going to want to look for those rock areas, those big rocky flats that they're going to be moving into spawn. And then post-spawn, sort of the same deal, except you're going to want to focus on those side edge structures a little more, especially as you get later on, depending on where you are. So here it's mid-May is about the time they spawn. So that's when you're going to want to start keying in there. As you move towards late May, June, as they start moving away into the post-spawn, you're going to want to start focusing on these. A lot of what we do is big, long docks into deep water, so that anywhere from about 11 to 14 feet of water, sometimes even 15, 16, depending on the exact lake, you're going to want to fish that area. Again, as you get into May and June, they'll slowly keep pushing out and away. So if you can find flat weed beds that are out deeper like that, then you can start keying in on those as well. So then, here, I don't even need that for this. So the summer is a little bit different because that's when the fish typically move deeper. Some guys still like to fish shallow, but a lot of times you can't find the bigger, more plentiful fish up shallow in the summer because the bigger, meaner, badder fish that are going out and just feeding like crazy during the right times. They're going out deeper to find bigger stuff to eat, whereas the smaller fish will stay in shallower and they'll feed on little bugs and tiny fish. But those bigger fish in the summer, they're gonna move way offshore, and I'll go into it after, where you're gonna wanna look for ledges and edges specifically, and I'll show you kind of what you wanna look for there later on. But that's the main thing with the summer, is to start moving deeper. So I usually say anywhere between about 18 and about 24 feet of water. So that's usually my area. And then you can kind of scope it in on the specific spots where those schools are specifically. As you move into the fall, it's very much like the pre-spawn, where it's large groups of fish or of crappie specifically, and they're moving around trying to feed and fatten up for the winter. So it's kind of that same depth again. So if you go in, you get those pushed out weedy areas, any big area where they can find a lot of food and just stock up and just pound bait, pound whatever food source they have in big schools and just continuously feed and fatten up. That's where you're gonna find them. So kind of like that pre-spawn, if you can find a few fish, you've probably found at least a decent sized school. And if you can just hammer that school and stay with it as it makes those little movements, you are all set for the fall. And then the winter, a lot of guys say it's the hardest time. I would definitely agree with that, especially ice fishermen, because the fish move back towards open water and they spread out into really small concentrated schools. So you may have like one big rock in the middle of the lake that you can dig down and fish and find a bunch of fish there. But once you catch quite a few, they'll either disperse or they'll just start getting tired of seeing the same thing that you're dropping down to them. So that winter time, especially again if you're ice fishing, it becomes very difficult to find fish and consistently catch them because they're in that spread out form. Okay, now the one time of year that I said before that I really wanted to dig into was the summer, and a specific kind of things you're looking for to find fish, because a lot of guys have trouble with the summer. They'll get to mid-June, late June, and they'll just stuff the rods away. I'm done fishing crappie now. I'm not going to find them in the summer. They're way offshore. I don't want to fish offshore, all that. And then they wait till the fall when they get back into those big schools and move back in a little bit. But there is fantastic summer fishing to be found with crappie if you can find something specific that you know you can fish on and find fish. And one of the biggest things, here's another one of my silly little graphics. So that's the top of the water. This is rock and this is weeds. Anytime you can find a little change in the bottom structure, whether it be weeds to rocks, weeds to like flat sandy or even just a rocky flat, a big sand flat into rocks, a big sand flat into weeds, just any type of bottom change, that is critical to locating the fish to a spot. A lot of guys, they try to pick one or two like specific like offshore rock reefs and they stick to that one. That's not a bad plan, but crappie consistently move. So when it's low light, when they really like to feed, they'll sometimes even push up onto those deep docks and like stump structures that are like 15 to 14 feet of water, and you can find some of those really big loners during that darker time of the day. So really early morning, really late evening, you can maybe find some of those really big fish pushed up on docks. But your schools of decent sized fish are typically going to be in these little nooks and crannies where the bottom structure changes, and they'll move along that. They'll find a say one reef and they'll feed off of it, and then they'll move down it as the day goes on, or as it gets dark they'll move back in a little bit and start feeding. So if you can find an edge, this is where electronics help a lot. If you can find an edge where it changes from, say, like I have here, weeds to rocks, you can then find kind of that edge that the fish are moving along. So say you find, I'll go weeds and rocks again. It goes from weeds to rocks at 16 feet of water. You know, all right, I know they want to be between about 18 and 24 feet, depending on the depth of the lake during the summer. So I can fish that edge of 16 and then just move a little deeper into the rocks and then pick out reefs that they might be working on through the day. And as you build a pattern, you can find, all right, they're on this reef at this time at 18 feet. Then later in the day, they're at 22 feet on this reef. And then as it gets really late in the day, they kind of move back towards the edge in between the weeds and the rocks. So you can, it does take time to kind of develop it and learn the specific lake you're on, but it does help if you can find that change and then find little areas as you go. That's why I'll talk about like techniques and my setups and how I actually fish when I'm in the boat later on. Probably do some stuff from in the boat, but I'll show you how you can set up your boat and I love doing big long drifts, and you can find little pockets, and then you can key in on those spots and find exactly where those fish are at the time of the day. So there's one other kind of type of lake that we fish, especially here up in the Northeast, and I know a lot of guys down south fish similar lakes, is these big flat lakes that only go like 12 feet deep or so, and most of it's like 5, 6 feet, 8 feet deep with some weeds. One of my favorite lakes, which is right down the road from me to crappie fish year round, is one of those. So those kind of lakes where there's not much depth change and it's just weed beds everywhere, all weeds across the lake, those are actually, they can be just as hard to find fish, but they can be just or even easier to fish, if that makes sense. So when you have a lake like that, the fish key in on depths rather than changes in structure or specific structures. So when we're fishing the spring in the spawn, it's the same thing, up shallow in the weed areas, the flats. You fish up into cover onto docks as the spawn goes on, and you fish all through that. But then when you get to the summer, you get those isolated schools of fish, or you get one big school of crappie, and they'll move around. But since it's almost all one depth, they just consistently move. So I have an earlier video where I fish in this lake, and it's just a huge cove that I fish, and I'll do multiple drifts all through the cove, and you can kind of just try and find and follow that school. So you catch a few out of one spot, you go, okay, they're here now. Now where are they moving in the cove? Are they going left to right? Are they going diagonally across the cove? So you can kind of just find one or two schools of fish and try to follow them through that area, because most of the time they're going to be in that one consistent depth. So if you find in the summer, you're looking for those deeper depths, so you'll find them in that 8 to 12, and then in that big area, you just have to find the specific school in that spot and follow them, or one of the schools in the spot, and you just do a long drift and follow and just hit different little schools. So it's just a matter of knowing the depth and then working in that area of finding the school of fish in those weedy, flat, different kinds of lakes. Thank you everybody for watching today. If you want to catch the rest of the series as I post it, you can subscribe, turn on post notifications, then you'll of course see the next episodes. The specific next one I'm going to do is the specific lures that I like to fish with crappie throughout the year, or in specific types of bodies of water. And if you would be interested in that, again, subscribe, turn on post notifications, like this video, and just stay tuned for the next one. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below, or you can catch me at my Instagram, send me a DM or a comment there at bigbird.outdoors, so the same thing as the YouTube, just with a dot between bird and outdoors, and of course it's all one. If you want to see my guide service, I will post the link for the website down below, and I will also post my handle for Instagram there, which is at CentralCT Freshwater Fishing Guide. Or guides, sorry. That's all I got for today, so I hope you enjoyed today's video, and stay tuned for the next episodes. Go out and catch yourself some crappie. Hopefully this helped everybody, and I'll see you next time.